Fix podcast. We've got another stellar individual here with us to share their journey from rock bottom moments to clarity and, of course, the success on the other end of the struggles in the trenches of substance abuse. And so today we've got Andy West with us here. Andy, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And where are you coming to us from, Andy?
So I'm in a little town called Blackbutt outside of Brisbane, so about 2 hours out of Brisbane. So it's very remote. It's a little tiny town of about 1,000 to 2,000 people.
Now, for all of the people very ignorant, well, not very ignorant, all of the people that are delightfully ignorant like myself, like, where's Brisbane?
So if you've heard of Sydney, yeah?
Sydney, Australia.
So Brisbane is probably many hours drive north. I'd say like 14 hours drive north of there maybe, so up in Queensland on the east coast.
Nice.
So probably similar to like a California type climate, but a smaller city, a fun smaller city really.
Right. So, and forgive me because whenever I hear Australia, I hear an accent. I'm a guy from the States, so I am all of those stereotypes. I just see like, a cinematic version of what I'm familiar with. And so forgive me if I'm putting any kind of stereotypes on there, but I still think it's cool that you're coming to us from a very remote place. And I'm so excited that you've got the opportunity to share your time with us. And so now that being said, though, everybody comes onto this show, Andy, I always ask them, all right, when did the shit hit the fan? Why did it get ugly for you? And what were those dark times like for you?
I've had so many rock bottoms really. So I think when I was a kid, I was bullied. So I already started out from a low self-esteem kind of person. So I didn't really know where to get my dopamine or how to get my dopamine. So I think a lot of people who struggle with being bullied, because when you're bullying someone, you've got no self-esteem. So you're stealing it from them. So, then they're trying to steal back some kind of self-worth from somebody else, and you just get into this pattern of kind of abuse, really, and
Now,
so it's not
real
healthy.
quickly, Andy, I'm so sorry to pump the brakes on you, but I just want to, just so I can catch everybody up, because you and I were kind of talking already, but like what Andy generally addresses and talks about is dopamine. And so like, that's going to be the high level subject matter of dopamine. And just to like kind of catch you, because you were like, borrowing dopamine, and we've already started talking about like kind of like the trade of dopamine and where to get it and how it works a little bit, but I just want to kind of catch everybody up
Yeah,
that's kind of that's your thing, right?
it is my thing because I sort of think about my life reframed in how dopamine affected my life. But really, just to backtrack, dopamine just means mood. The chemical of mood is dopamine. So when your mood is up, it's because your dopamine is up. And when our mood is down, it's because our dopamine has gone down. So if I say mood, dopamine, same thing. And interestingly, our mood and our drive are so tightly tied to dopamine as well. So our drive and motivation for anything, and especially addiction, if we are wanting any kind of wanting, it's because we're trying to fill a dopamine gap. Yeah, but for me, I could also say my mood was so low that I didn't know how to get any happiness. So I was just doing very quick fix kind of things, like a bit of nastiness just to spike the adrenaline type of thing,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, because that's a
Yeah.
source is like, putting people down. That's why so many people if that's what has kind of become familiar for them. But you're right, it can be a source, not a very long-lived source, but it can give you this kind of superiority, right? Like, I'm better than you, so I'm going
Yes.
to put you down. And that's where you
Yes.
really ran into that first early in your life, was when you were getting
Yeah.
bullied. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course I didn't realize that at the time because you're just a kid. You don't know what you're doing. But you think I feel crap because what you said. Well, how about this? And then you go spread that on someone else. But you tend to not spread it on the bully because you're too scared. So you go take it out on the wrong people, and then it just doesn't stop. So anyway, that was kind of me. And then when I found drugs in high school kind of age, I was a binge drinker. I was a little bit into smoking weed, but then when I found amphetamines, like speed, kind of found that better than the drinking. I hardly drink much after that, or if I did, it didn't like really land. When you drink alcohol, the amphetamine kind of balances that out anyway. Uh, so I was binge drinking and then amphetamines, and then I was injecting the amphetamines. So Sorry if my connection is a little bit
Ooh,
rough at the moment, but I was just partying,
well,
taking ecstasy.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a few rock bottoms in that time because my self-esteem was still really low, and I was just kind of self-medicating that with party drugs. And I found that amphetamines would make me confident where I had no confidence before. I could just talk to people effortlessly. I would just chat. I would have energy all night just to party and dance. And so it wasn't, it didn't really start out too rough, but then I found out that I was just thinking about amphetamines, and a couple of my friends were injecting it, and one of my
Wow.
friends wouldn't teach yeah, he wouldn't teach me to inject it. And I lied and said I was already doing it myself, but it was better if he would do it for me. So I tricked him into teaching me how to inject. And may I be frank?
Right. Yeah.
May
That's kind of the name of the game around here. Yeah. Hit us with it.
Well, that first time that he injected amphetamine for me, it hit so hard and so fast. It was the most blissful and euphoric you can imagine something to be. So, of course, then I was obsessed. From that moment on, I just wanted to feel like that because I'd come from feeling generally shit to feeling on top of the world. And I could see why, okay, wow, people just can't stop doing this because, of course, the crash afterwards is terrible. But you think, well, that's okay because I know how to feel good again. And now I've got this secret thing and I'll feel amazing anytime I want to.
Right, right. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the vicious loop, right? That's chasing the dragon, whatever you want to call it. I mean,
Mm,
that's when you
mm.
get that burst, and because I like funny enough, and I'll share with you when I was addicted to pills. I was addicted to many things, but when the pill addiction really grabbed a hold of me was when they sent a nurse to my house, and that nurse paid for by my insurance taught me how to crush up my pain medication and inject it into a tube that I had in my lower intestine. And it was like, boom, it
Wow.
was like lightning.
Wow.
And my best friend saw it. He says he remembers seeing my eyes. He was like, dude, when that hit your lower intestine, because it wasn't even in my veins, it was in my lower intestine, but it's same notion, super
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
Boom. He's like, I saw your eyes, and that's when I lost you. That's exactly what he said. So that
Yeah.
that lightning striking is just, I mean, well, do you still think about that? Because at that time, right, that's all the good and no real bad. Do you ever kind of like
Right.
reflect on that and that euphoria and like how it's nearly unmatched? Do you ever like kind of like go back there sometimes?
Well, yeah, I was going back there like every minute of every day for so long because that's what addiction is, you know. It was obsessing about that feeling. And anytime I didn't have that feeling, that's all I wanted. I just wanted to feel good again because my general life still went back to me feeling with low self esteem and shit, and also then the come down from the drug. So
Yeah.
all I wanted to do was feel that. And it was just self medicating. It was just I didn't really want to go, well, I kind of was self-destructive as well, to be honest, because I went through a number of years of being suicidal. And it was during that time because, of course, my dopamine was just crash after crash. So it was very lucky that I survived it, really, because then I started just using it anytime I could. But because I was studying at the time, I was kind of responsible in that I could mostly hold off during the week and then just party on weekends at the
Okay.
start.
Right.
Because also I couldn't afford or get very much amphetamine because I was in a small town, like a reasonably small town at the time. So there was also a supply thing. And some of the rock bottoms, one time without really thinking, I went to try and score some drugs, and the guy I was getting it off, he'd already put it into needles. And he said, "Oh, it's clean, it's fine, you know." And I just didn't really think. I don't know. He said they're new needles. I didn't think is it clean? Is it in new needles? You know, and only till after I'd used it did I think, "Why am I trusting this guy?" You know, even though he was a sort of acquaintance who I'd bought from before, I'd never bought it already like that.
That's
And
crazy.
also, yeah,
That is
and a
just
friend
that
of
is
mine had it
crazy
at the
to have it
same
already.
time. It's stupid, but at the time, that's all I could get, and I really did not consider what could have gone wrong, and thankfully nothing went wrong. Like, I have had many tests,
God,
and
you
I've
scared me. I was
luckily,
like,
that was the closest I came to yeah, no, nothing happened. Maybe it was a clean needle because, yeah, I'm all fine.
yeah, but that's not.
Thank
I
God.
mean, it's like, no, he's good for it. He's my
That's not
drug
cool.
dealer. Like he's
It's
woo,
just
okay.
it's just you're looking at these, like, nice shiny needles sitting there going, "I want that." You don't even think what it could have been because I'd never done sharing needles, I'd never used old dirty needles before. So it just wasn't even in my brain that people did because I was lucky enough to know that you don't do that. And we had like free needle exchange where we were. So that was
Right,
good because you could just go exchange an old packet for a new packet for free.
right.
So that was a nice initiative to
Still bad. It's
protect
still pretty
people's health.
rough. Well, you scared the shit out of me on that one. But what
Mhm.
you were saying, there's a few of these moments. So I guess what is some of these other times that maybe you look back and think to yourself like, my God, like you just basically stepped in front of a train.
Oh, well, to be honest, the biggest rut of my life and the biggest rock bottom was actually after I'd had fatigue and brain fog and all these complications after having COVID. But I also happened to have a drug induced psychosis at the time as well. That's a whole weird story where I was accidentally using THC from cannabis as a muscle rub. And it was getting into broken skin because I had a skin rash at the time and I was getting myself high for like days to maybe even weeks on end, and I had a psychosis and I had a big panic attack,
Mm.
and I had COVID at the time, and everything collapsed in my life at that point, and that was my biggest rock bottom, and it sort of was drug induced, but I wasn't a user at that time. That skips way forward, where I wasn't deliberately using any drugs.
Hmm.
But to skip back a little bit, with the amphetamine thing, I accidentally got clean because this is a weird story. And now I kind of understand it from a dopamine perspective. But what happened was in that town, of course, there was a war on drugs, and the drug supply got so weak that everyone who was getting it was just cutting and cutting it down till there was almost no drugs in it.
It,
But of course, I kept using it. So I was continuing to use something that was basically nothing. It was like water. It was like injecting water. But
so
what happened was
they basically weaned you off. They did. The drug dealers
they
weaned you off.
tapered. They titrated and tapered my drug use down to nothing. And after a period of weeks, I thought, this is shit. This is no fun. I'm not even enjoying this anymore. And I never forbade myself. I never said, no, you can't have it. And I think that was the real thing because I found out later that when you completely forbid yourself and you feel trapped by those new rules, you break them, especially if you're an addict. Like, you actually get dopamine from breaking rules because of the freedom and the autonomy in it. So I was extremely lucky, and kind of what happened was I was no longer getting dopamine from this drug. In fact, it was dropping my dopamine because my expectations of the drug were high, and then my dopamine was going low. So
Right.
that's actually how you break an addiction, it turns out. I didn't know that at the
It
time.
turns out. It
And I
turns
went,
out right.
yeah, and I sort of went, I guess I'm not addicted, so I can stop now if I want. And I never said, I'm stopping this forever. I just said I don't want it, which was amazing because I did actually continue to take like ecstasy and GHB and some party drugs. So that was about 3 or 4 years that I was injecting. But then I still like partied on the weekend type of thing. So it was a really weird, yeah, situation.
That is really weird. Also, serendipitous, I suppose, right? Like, I
Mm,
mean, it's just because it couldn't have been any more ideal. And even like
mm.
myself with the pills, like, by the time I started really kicking the habit, they just weren't around. You know what I mean? Like, it
Okay.
wasn't. It was just even now. It's like the situation here in the States is completely different than it was when that nurse came to the house and gave me. I mean, it was like pills were just like everywhere, and now that it's not the case, which, again, it seems to be that situation was, like I said, a serendipitous situation for your own sobriety there, but you continued to dabble in some other things, but those other things weren't necessarily ruining your life or threatening you too much. But I really I want you
Mm.
to, because I just love the subject of dopamine. I love this. I get off on dopamine thinking about it because, like you had mentioned, it orchestrates everything that we do. So much of our decisions is based upon our dopaminergic system inside of our bodies. Am I right? So, like, explain to me how that developed out of an addiction and out of that lifestyle that you had had.
Think I'd always been a dopamine chaser looking back, because I was always trying to do whatever the quick fix was. I was taking every shortcut I could do. And it turns out like I was kind of retraining my brain to only look for shortcuts and to not persevere, So the more I rewarded myself doing whatever was faster and easier to do, was just deleting the brain circuits involved in longer term planning and things like that. Yeah, so it turns out after I kind of was forced to I was so unwell with this chronic fatigue and brain fog. My brain started to really shut down. I thought I was getting dementia. Like I was so incapable of working. I was incapable of like almost a conversation to follow what the other person was saying, and I thought this is going to kill me. And so that's when I started. Well, it took me over 3 years of trying to put my brain online. And I was worried, how am I going to survive? What am I going to do to make money? Because I was so stuck. So it might have been the long COVID. I don't really understand what exactly it was. I put it down to long COVID at the time. But when I had the drug-induced psychosis, I had like a brain, I called it my mental breakdance because like my reality turned from optimist to pessimist, So my mindset, because I was also going through a bad relationship at the time, my mindset completely turned negative and I didn't know where to get like my joy or my dopamine or anything at the time. And that really affected the thing is I had anhedonia, which is like depression but not the sadness, so it's all the chemical signs of depression. But I'd luckily found my self-worth in the meantime. Like I was relatively good with myself, but I just had nothing in the tank, no energy, no drive, nothing.
If you could explain a little bit anhedonia, because
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means. Like you said, it has some traits that run similar to maybe depression, but help me out.
Yeah.
What is that?
Anhedonia. So to be hedonistic means to seek pleasure, and so anhedonia means to have no pleasure. And because there's no dopamine, so there's no pleasure, no drive. So there's three main ways that you can have anhedonia. One is no dopamine. Another one is no GABA, which is similar to dopamine. And the other one is really high glutamate, which is the opposite of dopamine. So that's it chemically. That's kind of how it works. But to the person who has it, you just feel like your tank is on empty all of the time and there's nothing you can do about it. It seems there is, but it seems like you've tried everything and there's nothing that will get you out of this rut. And it's extremely depressing to be like that. And it causes anxiety to be like that because you're like, I'm a full human, yet I have 1% power. And what am I going to do? Like, it's going to kill me. Like, it feels like it's going to kill you every day. And it feels horrible because having very low dopamine feels like hell. It's
Yeah.
no joy. You cannot have pleasure. You cannot have drive. You feel like a zombie every day. So it's extremely heartbreaking to feel like that. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But
Right.
there's a lot of people out there struggling with it and they don't even know what it's called sometimes because, of course, they've got a fancy name. And it just, they're like, some of them are like, I'm not sad. I don't have depression. What is wrong with my brain? And that's probably what it is.
Anhedonia.
Mm,
Okay. Yeah. And so
mm,
it's
mm.
the lack thereof of the dopaminergic system, right? Or the dopamine, right?
Right.
And now correct me if I'm wrong, right? I'm just saying this and I have a high chance of being wrong here, but dopamine is a hormone, right?
I believe it can act like a hormone. It's more
Excellent.
commonly known as a neurotransmitter or a neuromodulator, which means that I'm not very well versed in hormones. So as a neurotransmitter, it just basically means that energy in the brain can move from one part to another. Like it facilitates the transfer of energy. So
Right.
it's kind of like it allows the smooth flow of energy from one place to another, to sort of put it simply.
So Andy, how did you get to the other side of the anhedonia, right? Like what was it? Like what did you start doing?
Well, I was trying everything. I was trying supplements, doctors, blood tests. psychiatrists, psychologists. Weirdly, well, it's not weird, I suppose, but ADHD medication was working for me, which is an amphetamine. It was working because it was boosting my dopamine, but I couldn't get it legally on a prescription because I didn't have a diagnosis, and it's a very hard, long process to get one here. And I did not want to rely on amphetamine again. I'd already been there, and I just kind of knew there must be another way because since early 2020, even before there was vaccines or anything, when I first got the original, what I thought was long COVID probably was, I was reading about dopamine. I was reading about all these supplements you could have, and none of them worked. And eventually I came across randomly a Joe Rogan podcast when he mentioned this other author called Stephen Pressfield. And just the way he spoke about this guy and how he spoke about motivation, I thought, I have to read this book. So I downloaded the ebook. And at the same time, I was trying many protocols. And what ended up working in the correct order, which is weirdly, but this is so important for dopamine, the order that you do things in. So I would get up and go for a hard run, like a difficult run in the morning. I hate running, but I just thought I need to challenge myself and really push myself first thing in the morning. So I did that. And then I would take a cold shower, which again, it would push my dopamine down on purpose. Then I would have a black coffee, and then I would do because it started to work. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write down what I'm doing and how it works, and that's what became the book, the writing that I forced myself to do.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
roughly that was my protocol. Early on, I wasn't having the cold shower right in the morning. I was having it a bit later on. But the whole premise is if you want to jumpstart your dopamine, the only way it works is if you deliberately lower your dopamine first with something difficult and hard and not enjoyable, and then you raise it afterwards. It has to be in that order. And the reason is that because dopamine only feels good when it's going from lower to higher, when it's actively rising. But if we stack too many pleasures on top of each other, like coffee, sugar, scrolling, porn, gambling, drinking, whatever it is, anything that feels good, when we stack them all, there's a ceiling and there's no drop, so that it flatlines. Okay, so that becomes our new low, and no one understands this. Even doctors aren't really telling people this.
That's so imperative because
Mm.
I talk a lot about how in my life and when I was at the height of my addiction and of course my substance abuse, I would say to myself, well, me and all my peers, where's your happy meter at? Where's your happy meter at? And so we were perpetually chasing joy and happiness. And I knew if I bought a bag of cocaine, it was going to give me happiness for the next 10 or 15 minutes. But just like you had mentioned, we were never addressing the lows or even recovery or even a break. It was just stack on top of it. It's like cocaine, then sex, then whatever, then snowboarding at a high level, right? And then stack that right with alcohol right there at the end. And it was literally stacking to the point where, very much about what you had just mentioned happened. It happened that the stacking was no longer working because there wasn't an allowance for the valleys, right? And so I was just trying to remain at this peak, and it was the joy and the reward became fewer and fewer each time that I would do these things that typically gave me a reward of joy or happiness or whatever it may be. But man, you're knocking it out of the park as far as my own mind and my own experience is concerned. Why? Because I did exactly that. I tried to stack it, never once addressing the very reality of that there has to be a low. I just refused to let it happen. And so anyways, but you're right. Doctors aren't mentioning it. Nobody's really addressing it. And we're just all perpetually, trying to stack endlessly. And it's a recipe for disaster. But okay.
Yes.
So you built your protocol, you built your sequence, right? So you do hard things. And then you built that in your life, and then how did it evolve into like what you're into these days, where dopamine is such a large part of your life?
I found that if I didn't do that protocol, then I would have a day where I would slip back into low energy, low thought processes, couldn't focus on anything. My focus was so bad. Like I would lose my concentration halfway through the thought of what I was going to do. It was a number of seconds is how bad it was to start with. And I could feel it slipping back if I didn't do my difficult things in the morning. So the idea is to have a hard morning, but not extreme. Like when you've come out of chronic fatigue, you can't be extreme. You have to gently move yourself into hard, but not extreme. Because with chronic fatigue, it's too much glutamate, which is that opposite of dopamine. And if you push it too far, you have a crash and a burnout kind of situation. So, yeah, so I had to make my mornings hard. And then if you do that, it means you will have an easy afternoon because, like you said, that's how dopamine works on that scale, the low to the high. Because the body would just recalibrate if you're stacking all those pleasurable things. And it goes, well, I guess this is the new low then. And then it looks for a high. It goes, okay, this is normal. This is our normal, all these pleasures. What are we going to do for a mood rise? And then, of course, it has to be extreme. It would be, and that's why people keep taking more and more drugs, of course, because they're looking for that rise without understanding that there needs to be a deliberate low. And here's the interesting thing. It can't just be an inflicted low, where because your dopamine is dropping because you're just having a come down or whatever. If you deliberately choose that low, you actually use dopamine to get the low, which means you're practicing the initiation of using dopamine, which means it can go higher. And the lower you push yourself, but gently, of course, and I don't mean self-harm or anything like that. I mean difficult chores, difficult workouts that you don't want or like, even cold showers. It's no fun. But it's been proven to have really impactful dopamine rise after it ends. So it's after that hard thing ends, then it can rise on its own, even just relief itself is a dopamine rise. So,
Right. So you
and to
seem
do it
to.
early in the morning.
Sorry. It
Oh,
just
sorry,
it's
I was just,
we got a little tiny bit of a lag, but that's all right. I wanted to say that it seems like you've got this rather calculated and a very healthy set of boundaries, like
mm,
because even when you're mentioning when you do intentionally like hard things, what came to my mind is that there's people that do very extreme things like 200-mile races, just for the average person they just think, my god, that what an outrageous stretch of the body and the mind and everything else like that. But it makes a lot of sense to me when I look at it from your perspective that you're proposing here, is that they're just going the other way, right? They've almost gotten addicted to not maybe the synthetic highs of drugs and everything, but they're getting addicted to these intentional lows, right? Like they're trying to like pull that bow and arrow back, right? And they're like, man, when I pulled it
mm.
back, that arrow went so far. So they're trying to pull it back and pull it back and pull it back. And I suppose that can get rather unhealthy.
Yeah, you can still become addicted to healthy things. People can get their dopamine from either feeling like they're the superior runner kind of thing. You can get dopamine from that. And from winning, you can get dopamine from that. Sometimes people do really hard things without a dopamine reward. And that's a whole different part of the dopamine reward system. If you're running and doing that, just say you had a parent who said, you must win this race, and you win it out of fear of what the parent will do or say if you don't win it. That's you're actually running on glutamate, which is our fight or flight type of chemical.
Uh,
It's another neurotransmitter that gives us energy, but it's the energy to get away, and it's the stress energy instead of the outgoing and forward moving and pleasurable kind of energy. So you can run on glutamate instead, which ends up really crashing because people who run like that, who just do very strict regimented lifestyle, they forget to give themselves the reward at the end. So they still get some relief just from stopping, but their dopamine system can really burn out as well. So people who are doing that need to reward themselves and make time for rest, pleasure, play, and that sort of thing after they do the hard things if they want their brain to stay healthy. Because there are many years they noticed that people who would develop Parkinson's disease were these people who were militant and strict and everything by the rules, low addiction. They were just very harsh on themselves, running on stress every day. And their dopamine reward system basically said, their dopamine neurons said, we don't need dopamine anymore. And they stop working. So there's two different sides to dopamine. So you got to
Yeah.
have balance. And that's why we always say things in moderation, things in balance. So do your hard things and then do your play and you'll be fine. So it must go effort, then reward, and then rest. Cycle through that all day and you will not have a dopamine problem.
Effort, reward, and then rest. Okay. Now is that
Yeah, in that
I mean,
order.
you just said it, but is that in a nutshell your framework, or maybe, what you have
Mm.
developed by kind of going all in on dopamine, and of course, talking about it and spreading the word about it?
Yeah, it really is effort, then reward, then rest, if you want to put it into a nutshell. Because these days we are able to get our coffee straight away, our food delivered, not here, but most people can get their food delivered. They can get up, they can have instantaneous porn access, and many people are addicted to porn. And I
Oh
don't
yeah.
judge that, but I just know that it's an extremely hard thing to break out of, no pun intended, but there are ways to break addiction. The easiest way that I've found to break an addiction, because I still have thoughts that are addictive thoughts, but what I deliberately do afterwards is drop my dopamine when I have the thought. Because for me, at least, addiction is the addictive thought. Because when we have an expectation of dopamine, just the expectation raises our dopamine. And so when we go, I want the drug, it spikes. I want the drug, it spikes. So we're just looping the wanting, and that is addiction. So if you have that addictive thought and then you do something hard or difficult straight away to lower the dopamine, it might be a push up or a couple of sit ups or a quick run or sometimes hot chili sauce. I will eat hot chili sauce because it just is a very quick dopamine drop. I like a bit of chili sauce, but I have some hot chili sauce to drop my dopamine. And some people, the reason that many people self harm and they don't realize it is because they've accidentally stacked too much ease, pleasure, and, high dopamine things. And the cutting lowers their dopamine. And then when they stop, they get a dopamine rise. They don't understand this. They've just accidentally stumbled upon a different way. I do not recommend harming yourself. There are other ways to drop your dopamine. So please do
Chili
chili
sauce.
sauce or a push up, you know, do some squats, as soon as you think the addictive thing, and you will retrain your dopamine because it's not rewarding it anymore. You're actually dropping it instead of allowing that wanting to get a spike, another wanting, another spike.
Yeah. I mean, that is phenomenal. And it's so phenomenal because of the simplicity, right?
Mhm.
And this is not the first time that I've heard this. I've
Mm.
heard and spoken to several people, very, very bright people, doctors and so forth. And they're like, just the act of what's the word I'm looking for? Like, by halting or disrupting that pattern and doing it with physical exercise, but you're being a little bit more specific. You can do it not necessarily with just exercise, but something that brings you down or that is hard to do, or so there's a few traits I'm looking at here that this action could involve, right? It could be difficult to do, maybe even like a math problem, or maybe this is even why
Mhm.
people count down backwards from a certain number, or it seems like there's a lot of applicable ways to disrupt that pattern. But I have heard physical exercise, I've heard that several times. This is the first I've heard of the chili powder, though. This is like, but it
Mhm.
makes sense, right? Like, that totally
Yeah.
makes sense. Now, Andy, tell us, like, so your book is about, it's the Dopamine Mountain, right? That's the title. And
Yeah.
so,
So the analogy that I used was that if you're on a snowy mountain and you want to slide or snowboard down the other side, you got to climb it first. So if you want that pleasure and the enjoyment, you need to put in the hard effort to get to the top of that mountain. Because if you don't put in that effort, there's not much sliding to be had. If you're at the bottom of the mountain in a puddle of mud, you're just going to end up with snowboards hitting you in the face. So if you would like to have some pleasure, you've got to put in the hard work first. So that's the analogy of the dopamine mountain.
right. Right. And there's so many ways to approach that, or ways to get it done, right? And so, like, in your book, do you help develop like some processes like that? Or what would be like a nugget that you could pull from your book to maybe let some people know what it looks like?
Yep. So a lot of people struggle to initiate the first movement. And like me, I was stuck in bed for many, many days. I did not know how to get my body to move. I would have given you $1 million to learn how to get out of bed. And if you would have given me $1 million to get out of bed, I couldn't have done it because I didn't know the steps. So if you're really stuck, for me at least, what I needed to do was take any tiny step and reward it. Even putting one figure closer to the edge of the bed and then a reward, whether it be like, yes, that was a step. Don't call it failure, call it a step, because every step closer to the goal is a success. And the other thing, when people tell you to break down your goals into smaller parts, they forget to tell you to reward those small parts. Without reward, our dopamine system will not run. We need effort and reward. And if it's a rest, it doesn't have to, if it's a small effort, it doesn't have to be a big rest. It could just be a micro rest. Take a breath, you know. Okay, let's do the next step now. So if I'm really struggling to do something, what I now use as my reward is a Skittle. A one Skittle, sometimes two Skittles. And it could be any sweet or candy or whatever, but that's what I use because they're just easy to carry around. So if I need to get up and wash the dishes, yes, you can have your Skittle when you wash the dishes. But this only works if you're not eating sugar the rest of the time. Otherwise, it doesn't spike your dopamine. It's just random dopamine all day. So I do not eat sugar until I make myself work for it because I love sugar because for me it spikes dopamine. But for other people it might be like if they're a smoker and they want to cut down on smoking, yes, you can have your cigarette, or they might say to themselves, yes, I can have my cigarette when I choose to do this chore. You know, don't have it first. Just make sure you do something hard and then have it. You'll probably smoke less and you'll get more stuff done, and it will feel more rewarding because the dopamine hasn't just gone from high to high. You've pushed it low on purpose, and then the cigarette will feel more rewarding. So you probably won't need to smoke two. Then you'll say, okay, now I'll go do the next thing on my list, and I will wait and have that cigarette as a reward. And it completely changes how your brain works because it's a proper reward system now instead of just being random.
Right. And I feel like by going back to the protocol that you had mentioned with the running, and you don't like running, right? And then the cold
No,
shower,
hate it.
and that's like it's your kind of like one size fits all hard thing to do. Now, whatever comes after that in any particular day, it doesn't matter, right? Because you've already
Pretty
done
much.
right. And so by being proactive about it and kind of like, like pulling back that arrow first thing every morning, it kind of puts you in a better position for each and every day, depending, no matter what comes next. You've already done that hard thing very first thing in the morning. And so, of course, every day looks different, but every day has been set up the same way with the hard thing first, right? And it can look like that for
Yes.
anybody. And so, okay, I see that. I see where that how it's ingenious to just no matter what's going to go on, whether it's going to be a hard day, easy day, a long day of work, or a long weekend day of vacation, you're still kind of pulling that arrow back. You're kind of setting that dopamine level low in preparation for the launch and those Skittles, right? And so, I mean,
So
I
I
think
say to myself, if I make this the hardest thing of my day, I deliberately say, I want this to be the hardest thing of my day. And then I know, and I'm confident that if I can do that for myself as a gift to myself, because I want to challenge my brain and body, then the rest of the day, I trust myself to handle it.
I mean, it's glorious. I mean, it really is glorious. And from my experience or my knowledge about dopamine, it does and has kind of navigated our entire culture and society from like the beginning, right? Like those dopaminergic systems in our body were how we, like I had mentioned before we started recording, is like how we've populated the earth was like a desire, right? Like a what's over that mountain? Well, let's figure it out,
Mm,
right? And so there was that's how we kind of made it into every nook and cranny of this planet, is that particular system of desire and reward. Because once our ancestors got over the mountain, it was like, hey, we did it. And it was like, hey,
mm.
this place isn't so bad. And like we just kind of did this all over the place. But I've always found that fascinating how deep that system is embedded in our psyche and in all of our decision making. And then now we find ourselves in a current state of our society where it's been, it's quite easily manipulated with devices and technology. It's all the same thing,
Yes.
like porn,
We
gambling, right? Like it's nuts.
we evolved, if you want to think about it that way, but or you could say designed, whatever. We did effort, reward, rest because we had to hunt or gather our food, and the food is the reward. So, like going back hundreds of years, if you didn't get up and do some hard work, you had no food. You had to find it or kill it or gather it or whatever. The food is the reward, and then you had to rest to digest it. And that is why it's effort, reward, rest. This isn't you know, I didn't come up with this, nature did. So we ran that way, and now we've hijacked it because we've done things backwards. And if you here's a thing that will astound you, like maybe it astounded me, but if I reward inaction, I get more inaction. So if I do nothing and then I give myself a reward, the brain goes, well, great, this is how we get our dopamine now. We don't need to put in effort. We don't need to think in a complex way. We just get our dopamine. And the brain actually deletes old circuits that don't get used. So it forgets how to apply effort, how to goal set, how to do things that move us forward. And curiosity spikes dopamine. That's kind of our drive. So like you were saying, we want to know what's over the mountain or what's on the other side because it gives us dopamine to learn and to find out.
Love it. I love it.
Mm.
Now, Andy, what else do you got coming? And forgive me, I don't know. Tell everybody where to find your book. And I think you've got a couple of books out. And then maybe what you got on the horizon. Where can people work with you? Where can we learn more? All that type of stuff. Like, let us know.
So dopaminemountain.com is where you can get my book. And I did write one called Anhedonia Wastelands, which is a mini book of these concepts that we've talked about to help people just bust out of depression and anhedonia using these steps. So it's just a really concise way to do it without all the studies, because Dopamine Mountain has referenced over 800 different references and studies, because I wanted to find out, is this true and how to back it up with science? So I spent over a year doing that. So you can read about many studies that showed why this works and that, yes, this is what actually happens in the brain and body. And people can book me on Podmatch if they want to have a chat. We can have a chat, because all I basically want to do, if you want my book for free, then just email me and I will send you the ebook for free, because I care more about people learning about how to survive dopamine. I don't really care about the book sales, but that's also nice. I'm much more interested in people just enjoying, their natural drive and mood with proper dopamine. So yeah, just email me and I'll send you a copy of both of the books if they want. And I just want to talk to people about it and learn also what they do, because I've learned a lot from talking to other people about how they harness their dopamine too.
Right. And now I've applied well, if that was a question directed at me or not, but I'll share. I've learned to kind of set those I basically set myself up for success by doing some kind of a physical exertion. Now, I give a ton of credit to the cold plunges and that approach. Without a doubt, it works. I just always have gone just through the physical exercise. I've just used exercise, but I do it first because I just know better. And I can just almost never get those same workouts in later on in the day. I just know better. I get it done first, and then everything else seems to be much smoother after that point. And so, but nonetheless, there's no lack of credibility for eating the frog. I'm sure you've heard of that. You eat the frog. Right. Like you want to do the hard thing first, and then everything else after that is a breeze. Right. And so much value there. And I'm going to put everything, like you had mentioned, your email, the links for your books and everything like that for everybody to kind of take you up on that offer, because it's one heck of an offer. It's pretty cool. But yeah, Andy, if you were to just now you've been pretty concise thus far, right? But if you had any kind of maybe a recommendation or a little tip for somebody that maybe, that is stuck on the couch or maybe stuck in the bed and they're sitting there man, even for $1 million, I couldn't get out of here. What would be the first step or the best advice you could give them?
Mindset. So instead of me feeling anxious about stuff that I didn't want to do, I said, I do hard things that I don't want to do, so that I can do the hard things I do want to do. So every time I feel stuck, I say, no, I challenge myself because it's hard. I go towards hard things. bring it on. I want hard because I want to learn how to handle the hard stuff. So that's mindset in a nutshell, the growth mindset. I'm not a victim of anything. I want to take on the challenge because I will get better at challenge every single time. So if you're feeling stuck, just be like, yes, it's hard, and that grows my brain. Because studies did show that taking on challenge deliberately grows the brain, like physically, and it makes new connections in the synapse. So you will actually develop every time you try hard stuff, you will get better at hard stuff. So just keep on trying. It's like reps at the gym. It doesn't feel like it's working. Honestly, at the start, it didn't feel instantly like it's working, but you build up those reps and you get the growth.
Love it. It's been an absolute blessing. I truly appreciate your time, Andy. And this has been another episode of The Next Fix. We'll see you.
Thank you, Ryan.
You're very welcome. Yeah, like I said, I just feel like it's so awesome. It's so simple, concise. I think it's